Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're doing something a little different. We're taking a word that I guarantee you've used, maybe to describe, a really over-the-top hotel lobby or a movie plot that's just so complicated it makes zero sense.
Right.
And we're going to peel back the layers to see where it actually came from. And that word is Baroque.
And it is a word with a surprising amount of baggage.
It really is.
Yeah.
I was looking through the notes, and the origin story it's actually hilarious. We usually associate Baroque with, high culture wigs, fancy gold trim.
Of course.
But the word itself comes from the Portuguese barroco. And it was not a compliment.
Not at all. It refers to a specific kind of pearl, but not the perfect, round, valuable kind.
Yeah.
Barroco means a pearl of irregular shape.
Right, an irregular pearl. It was basically a jeweler's term for a reject.
And critics adopted it to insult the art of the time. I mean, if you called something Baroque back in the 1700s, you were calling it grotesque. You were saying, this is distorted, it's too much.
It's weird.
It's weird, exactly.
Which is so ironic, considering that today, when we think of the late Baroque, say, roughly 1600 to 1750, we don't think weird at all.
Right.
We think Bach, Handel, Vivaldi.
Right.
We think of music that is incredibly structured, almost mathematical.
And that is the central tension we really need to explore today. How did a style that started as an insult for being bizarre become, the bedrock of classical music?
Yeah.
And more importantly, how did this music reflect the world it was born into? Because the world of the 17th century was a place of massive contradictions.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're looking at the specific slice of history where two huge, seemingly opposite forces just collided. And according to the sources, those two forces are absolutism and science.
The twin engines.
The twin engines. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Absolutism. This is the era of the divine right of kings.
It's a concept that's really hard for us to wrap our heads around today. I mean, we aren't just talking about a dictator or a strong leader.
Yeah.
We are talking about a worldview where the king was literally God's chosen representative on earth. His authority wasn't just political, it was spiritual and total.
And the ultimate example has to be Louis XIV of France, the Sun King.
Oh, he's the poster child for this, absolutely.
He has that famous line, "L'État, c'est moi."
I am the state.
I am the state.
And whether he actually said it or not, he lived it. And to understand the music of this time, you have to visualize the environment Louis created. I mean, just think about the Palace of Versailles.
An 80-yard hall of mirrors, gold everywhere.
But look past the gold. Look at the gardens. The sources really emphasize this. The gardens at Versailles, they stretch for miles, but they aren't wild forests. They're manicured.
Totally. The trees are clipped into cones and spheres. The paths are perfectly geometrical.
It's nature, but under total control.
Right.
Exactly. It's the imposition of order over nature. The message Louis was sending was, I am so powerful, I can even force nature to obey geometry. And that philosophy, it just bled directly into the arts.
So when we see these elaborate Baroque operas, they aren't just entertainment. They're part of that same control narrative.
They were absolute propaganda, PR for the crown. The plots were almost always allegories. You'd watch an opera about, say, the Roman Emperor Titus, who uncovers a plot to kill him.
Okay.
But instead of executing the traitors, Titus forgives them.
Because he's just that awesome.
Because he is godlike. And the audience knew exactly who Titus was supposed to be. It was Louis.
Of course.
The message to the courtiers was subtle but clear. Your king is all-powerful but also benevolent, so don't cross him.
It's fascinating to think of art as like a political survival tool. But here's the twist. While these kings are walking around pretending to be gods, this second engine is revving up the age of science.
This is what makes the era so schizophrenic. You have Louis XIV in his high heels, but across the channel you have Isaac Newton discovering gravity. You have Leibniz inventing calculus.
Right.
You have the microscope and the telescope changing how humans literally see the world.
I loved the connection in the reading to the painter Vermeer. We usually think of his paintings, like the View of Delft, as just beautiful snapshots. But the analysis suggests something deeper is going on.
It suggests a scientific eye. If you look at the way Vermeer handles light or the microscopic details in his interiors, it's almost photographic. Some historians even think he used a camera obscura.
An optical device.
An optical device, yeah, to project the image onto his canvas.
So he wasn't just painting what he felt, he was analyzing the physics of light.
He was treating vision as a science. And that same analytical mindset just crashed into music. This is the part that, for me, just blows my mind. This is the era where we actually standardize the code of music.
You're talking about temperament.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this can get technical, but think of it this way. In nature, sound waves they're messy. If you tune a keyboard so that the key of C major sounds perfectly pure, just according to the physics of sound, the key of X sharp is going to sound like a dying cat.
Because the math doesn't quite close the circle.
Right. The circle doesn't close. So, for centuries, musicians were limited, that they couldn't use all the keys. But in the Baroque era, the scientific mind stepped in and said, we need a system that works everywhere. So they tempered the tuning.
They sort of fudged the math.
They compromised nature to create a system. They tweaked the tuning slightly, making everything just a tiny bit out of tune with pure nature so that every key was usable. It's the universal system.
It connects perfectly back to the Versailles Gardens. It's humans forcing a logical grid onto the messiness of nature.
And once you have that grid, that well-tempered system, composers like Bach could suddenly write in all 24 major and minor keys. It opened up the entire harmonic universe.
So we have the absolutist need for grandeur and the scientific need for systems. Now let's talk about the people who are caught in the middle of this, the musicians. Because I think we have this romantic idea of the artist. We picture Beethoven storming around the woods, or a modern songwriter pouring their heart into a journal.
And we need to just delete that image immediately. That is not the Baroque composer.
The sources compare them to something much more practical. They are like high-end cabinet makers.
Chippendale is the name that comes up. Thomas Chippendale made exquisite, complex, artistic furniture, but he made it because a rich client ordered a chair.
Right.
Baroque composers were artisans. They were servants.
So Bach wasn't sitting in a coffee shop waiting for the muse to strike.
Bach was looking at a calendar. He was a church organist. His contract stated he had to provide new music for the Sunday service every week. It didn't matter if he was sad, happy, tired.
The deadline is the deadline.
The service starts at 9:00 a.m., and if the music isn't there, he's in breach of contract.
It was a gig economy.
Completely. And you really only had 3 places to get a gig. The church, like Bach, the court working for a king or a duke, or the opera house.
Let's talk about the court for a second, because that seems like it would be a cushy job, but the notes imply it was kind of a roll of the dice.
It depended entirely on your boss. You might get lucky and work for Frederick the Great of Prussia, who was a serious flute player and actually respected the music.
Okay, the best case scenario.
Or you might work for a duke who just wanted background noise while he ate his venison. They called it Tafel music, table music.
Wow. Imagine being one of the greatest composers in history, and your job is basically to be a living Spotify playlist for a dinner party.
That was the reality. But at the third venue, the opera house, that was the wildest, because that's where you had to deal with the stars.
The divas.
The original divas. And this is where the whole cabinet maker analogy breaks down a bit, because a chair doesn't scream at you.
Ah, right.
Opera singers in the Baroque era held all the power.
The sources mention Faustina Bordoni and Francesca Cuzzone.
The 2 queens of the London stage. And they hated each other. There are stories of actual hair-pulling fights on stage during a performance.
No way.
But for the composer, they were a nightmare. If a singer didn't like an aria, or if it didn't showcase their specific money note, they would just refuse to sing it.
So the composer had to rewrite it.
On the spot, Handel famously threatened to throw Cuzzone out of a window because she refused to sing a simple melody he wrote. He physically grabbed her and said, "Madam, I know you are a she-devil, but I will show you that I am Beelzebub, the chief of devils."
I love that. But it shows the music was a commodity. It was built to order, resized to fit the singer, and delivered on a deadline.
And yet, despite being manufactured, it sounds incredible. So let's open up the hood. If we look at the technical toolbox of the Baroque, what makes it tick?
Well, the first thing the sources hit on is the rhythm. It's described as having a motor.
It is. It's relentless. Think of a Vivaldi concerto. Once it starts, it just locks into this drive. It doesn't speed up and slow down with the emotion like later romantic music.
It marks time.
It marks time. And that time is usually being marked by the harpsichord. That plucky, metallic sound is the heartbeat of the era.
The harpsichord is crucial, but notice the dynamics, the volume as well. It's very blocky.
Terrace dynamics.
Terrace dynamics, right.
They didn't really do crescendos. That smooth, gradual swell from soft to loud, that comes later. In the Baroque, it's like stepping off a ledge. You're either playing loud or you're playing soft.
It feels very architectural again, like blocks of sound.
It is. It's all about contrast.
Yeah.
Large group versus small group. And speaking of groups, the orchestra itself was an interesting beast. We mentioned the festive orchestra. That was for the kings.
The trumpets and drums.
The sound of absolutism. Big, loud, expensive. But for day-to-day stuff, the instrumentation was shockingly loose. You'd see scores where the top line is just marked treble.
So play it on a violin.
Or a flute, or an oboe, whatever you have lying around. It goes back to that scientific idea.
Yeah.
The structure of the music, the melody and harmony, that was the truth. The instrument playing it was just the packaging.
Now, underneath all that melody and rhythm, there is one thing that holds the entire building up. The sources say this is the defining feature of the Baroque.
The basso continuo.
Let's break this down because it sounds fancy, but it actually reminds me of something very modern.
It's the rhythm section. In a jazz band, you have the bass player and the piano player holding down the groove and the chords. That is the basso continuo. It's a low instrument, like a cello or bassoon, plus a chord instrument, like a harpsichord or organ.
And the way they wrote for it is fascinating. It's called figured bass.
This is pure efficiency. Imagine Bach has to write 20 minutes of music for Sunday. He doesn't have time to write out every single note for the harpsichord player's left and right hand.
Right.
So he writes the bass note and puts a little number underneath it, a figure.
Like a 6 or a 4.
Exactly. And that number tells the keyboard player which chord to play.
That sounds exactly like a lead sheet in or pop music today. If I'm playing guitar and I see G7 written over the lyrics, I know what to do. I don't need the notes written out.
It is the exact same concept. It's an algorithm. The composer provides the code, the bass, and the number, and the performer generates the realization in real time.
It's algorithmically generated music, but performed by humans.
And it required the performers to be incredibly smart. They weren't just reading dots, they were improvising the texture based on that math.
Which brings us to the texture of the music itself. We've got the bass at the bottom, what's happening on top.
Polyphony, which literally means many sounds. But think of it as a conversation where everyone is talking at once, but it somehow makes perfect sense.
It's a web.
It's a dense, active web. The flute isn't just backing up the violin. The flute has its own melody. The violin has its own melody. The cello has its own melody. They are independent lines weaving together.
That sounds intellectually demanding to listen to.
It is. You have to track multiple threads. It's the musical equivalent of a complex clock mechanism. Every gear is turning independently, but they all lock together to tell the time.
So we have this mechanical, mathematical, structured system, which begs the question, where's the feeling? Is Baroque music just cold?
That is the biggest misconception. It is intensely emotional, but, and here's that science engine coming back, it treats emotion as a science. The doctrine of the effects. You had philosophers like Descartes arguing that the body worked like a machine and emotions were just physical states caused by animal spirits moving in the blood.
So sadness isn't some mysterious soul sickness. It's a physical state that you can actually trigger.
Exactly. And composers believe they could trigger these starts using specific musical formulas.
Okay, give me an example. If I want to make the audience feel grief, what do I do?
You don't just channel your sadness. You look at the manual. Grief is represented by a descending chromatic line semitones falling downward. Dum 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 dum.
Kind of like a musical sigh.
It's the lament bass. It appears in hundreds of pieces. It was the mathematical formula for sorrow. If you wanted joy, you used fast triplets and wide intervals.
So it was almost like musical pharmacology, like, I want to dose the audience with rage, so I will administer Formula B.
That is a brilliant way to put it. And because it was scientific, they isolated the variables. A single movement of a concerto or a single aria in an opera would focus on one affect.
No mood swings.
No mixed emotions. If the aria is about rage, it is 100% rage from the first note to the last. It doesn't start angry and then get sad. It's a microscope focusing on one single emotional state and magnifying it to the extreme.
It's theatrical, like an actor delivering a monologue to the back row.
Isolated and magnified. That is the essence of the Baroque effect.
So when we step back and look at this irregular pearl, it actually starts to look pretty regular, or at least highly organized.
That's the paradox. The deep dive takeaway here is that the late Baroque was this fleeting moment where those two massive engines balanced each other out.
Absolutism in science.
On one side, you have the pearl, the desire for extravagance, for awe, for gold, for power, for emotional impact. That's the Versailles side of the equation.
And on the other side,
You have the grid, the figured bass, The tempered tuning, the doctrine of the effects, the belief that the universe is a logical place governed by rules.
The music is the collision of those two things.
Yeah.
It's wild passion, contained within a rigid safety deposit box.
Chaos under strict control. And I think that tension is why it still works today. We can hear the struggle between the human desire to be wild and the intellectual desire to be orderly.
It really challenges our modern idea of creativity, doesn't it? I mean, we tend to think that to be a true artist, you need total freedom. No rules, no bosses, break the system.
Right, but look at Bach. He had a boss, he had a deadline, he had a strict mathematical system he had to use. He was arguably the most constrained composer in history.
And yet, he produced the St. Matthew Passion.
Constraints can be a catalyst. You know, sometimes having a strict grid forces the human soul to work that much harder to break through.
I like that thought. Maybe the pearl's beautiful because it's fighting against the shell.
That's a poetic way to see it.
Well, that's our deep dive on the irregular pearl. I hope the next time you hear a harpsichord, you don't just hear fancy background music. I hope you hear the motor running.
And the math.
And the math. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next one.